Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 7 Part 32 based on novel. So let's start. In the bamboo house, after his initial hesitation, Lin Dong's finger finally landed in front of the cluster of light that held the wooden tablet. Are you certain? Ying Xuanzi gently smiled and asked. Yes. Lin Dong nodded. Since he had already made up his mind, he no longer had any misgivings. Although high-grade heavenly soul treasures were rare, it did not reach the extent where he was unable to abandon it. Upon seeing that Lin Dong had ceased hesitating, Ying Xuanzi also laughed faintly. He waved his sleeve and kept the other two light clusters into his sleeve. After which, he extended his hand and the black wooden tablet also slowly landed in his palm. Following the disappearance of the light on the wooden tablet, Lin Dong finally discovered that the surface of the tablet seemed to be covered in some extremely obscure and mysterious symbols. These symbols appeared to possess a life force and actually slowly rotated on the wooden tablet. Sect Master, what is this thing? What use does it have? Lin Dong carefully inquired. Static tablet. Ying Xuanzi replied faintly. Static tablet? Lin Dong was startled. His face was at a loss. In ancient times, there was once a divine item known as the static divine tablet. Once it was activated, it would be able to immediately freeze time and space. Those who were trapped within would no longer have the ability to resist and hence will be at the mercy of others. Ying Xuanzi played with the black wooden tablet in his hand. Even for someone like himself, there was an admiration that could not be hidden within his eyes when mentioning this so-called static divine tablet. Oh! Lin Dong was moved. To think that the so-called static divine tablet was actually so frightening that it could even cause time to stand still. Just how terrifying was such an ability? What relationship does this static tablet have with it? Lin Dong's eyes rotated as he asked the question that he was most concerned about. The static tablet is a soul treasure that was created by copying the static divine tablet. Do you really think that my Dao Sect actually possessed such a divine object? Ying Xuanzi laughed. So, it is an imitation. Lin Dong rubbed his nose. However, he was not disappointed. This was because he did not possess the wishful thinking that he would be able to obtain such a legendary divine object with such ease. However, even though it is a mere imitation, this static tablet is still able to surpass most high-grade heavenly soul treasures. Of course, it has not reached the level of a pure Yuan treasure. It can only be said to be between these two levels. Ying Xuanzi said. Lin Dong nodded. A pure Yuan treasure was considered an important treasure even within these super sects. Yet, this static tablet was merely an imitation. Regardless of how powerful it was likely difficult for it to reach the level of a pure Yuan treasure. Additionally, this static tablet might not possess the frightening strength of the real deal, but it is able to cause the opponent to be immobile for an instant when it is activated. I think that during a battle between experts, such an instant should be sufficient, right? Ying Xuanzi smilingly said. Lin Dong nodded excitedly. In a fight between the strong, any opening was fatal, much less directly causing the opponent to unexpectedly freeze. If he possessed this static tablet before he exchanged blows with Wang Yang, it was likely that the process of the battle would have been much more relaxed. Little fellow, you have good eyes. Take it. One requires mental energy to activate this treasure. However, you possess quite a great achievement in terms of mental energy. It will likely not be a problem. Ying Xuanzi laughed and threw the static tablet in his hand towards Lin Dong. It is an object without an owner. I have already helped you remove the obstructions to refining it. You will be able to use it once you refine it with blood. Lin Dong hurriedly extended his hand and received it. The black wooden tablet felt warm when it entered his hands. After touching it carefully, he found that it was neither wood nor metal. He was uncertain of just what it was made of. Upon receiving the soul treasure, Lin Dong unceremoniously pressed the tip of his finger, and a drop of fresh blood fell onto the static tablet. After which, a faint light scattered from it. A kind of vaguely present relationship quietly rose within Lin Dong's heart. The light on the static tablet became increasingly bright. At the end, it actually slowly floated. Finally, it transformed into a ray of light that directly entered Lin Dong's forehead and disappeared. Lin Dong's eyes slowly shut when the static tablet shot into his forehead. His mind swiftly entered his Niwen palace. Within the small world, where mental energy whizzed by, he saw the black wooden tablet quietly floating within. Mental energy slowly rotated around it like a wave, while threads of mental energy continued to pour in. Under this infusion of mental energy, Lin Dong could sense the various mechanisms within this static tablet and began to gradually become familiar with them. Lin Dong shut his eyes for 2 full hours. During this time, Ying Xuanzi did not rush him at all. All he did was to sit quietly like an old monk. Who? The sunlight outside of the window gradually became dim as those tightly shut eyes of Lin Dong were finally slowly opened. A mysterious light flickered within both his eyes. Finally, he suddenly extended his hands and slowly formed a relatively strange seal. Still, Lin Dong's eyes looked towards a butterfly flying at the window. The strange seal formed by his hand suddenly aimed at it. After which, a soft voice emerged from his mouth. Buzz. When that word was emitted from Lin Dong's mouth, an invisible and extremely mysterious fluctuation suddenly swept out from the spot between Lin Dong's brows. When that fluctuation erupted, the flapping wings of the butterfly dancing outside of the window suddenly froze. Its entire body appeared to have been embedded within the crevice of space and time. An extremely mysterious scene. However, this unusual scene did not last for long before it was shattered. The butterfly also flapped its wings from shock as it swiftly fled from this place. Such a mysterious static tablet, Lin Dong's gaze was burning. He licked his lips and laughed. From a certain point of view, this static tablet did not possess an overly strong killing power. However, this strange ability to cause something to freeze made Lin Dong's heart beat harder. It was likely that he would be extremely miserable if his opponent had such an ability in a life-and-death battle. However, it exhausts too much mental energy, Lin Dong added somewhat regretfully. He had merely used the stilling ability for a couple of breaths earlier, but the consumption of his mental energy had reached quite a frightening level. How can there be something completely perfect in this world? Ying Xuanzi laughed. Lin Dong nodded his head as he laughed dryly. He was indeed too greedy. This ability to freeze something was already so frightening. It would truly be far too unrealistic if one could use it as he pleased. It is good that you like this thing. Actually, according to the rules, even the champion of the whole competition cannot obtain this static tablet. Ying Xuanzi spoke with a deeper meaning to his words. Hehe, in that case, I will thank Sect Master for your generosity. Lin Dong caught the hint. He understood that if he had not stopped Wang Yang and finally handed the commanding authority back to Ying Xiaoxiao on his own accord, it would be quite difficult to obtain something like the static tablet. Ying Xuanzi involuntarily smiled. Soon after, he spoke again. There is another half a year before the Great Sect competition. All of you should pay more attention when that time comes. When he spoke until the end, the jade-like face of Ying Xuanzi had a frightening darkness flashing across it. Are the disciples of the Yuan Gate very strong? Lin Dong knitted his brows and asked. The strongest of the Yuan Gate disciples are the 3 little kings and the 8 soul generals, Ying Xuanzi slowly explained. 3 little kings, 8 soul generals, Lin Dong muttered. The Yuan Gate is divided into 8 sections. These 8 soul generals are the strongest disciples within the 8 sections. As for the 3 little kings, Ying Xuanzi curled his mouth. Only then did he continue. They are all considered to have been personally taught by the 3 sect masters of the Yuan Gate. All of them possess monstrous talent. They can be considered the most outstanding amongst the younger generation of the Eastern Xian region. Lin Dong's pupils shrunk a little. A cool air was slowly inhaled within his heart. Clearly, he did not expect that the so-called 3 little kings would have such overwhelming backgrounds. The 3 sect masters of the Yuan Gate were the top-level experts in the Eastern Xian region. Just how strong were those who had been personally taught by them? If you end up meeting them during the Great Sect competition, you must definitely be careful. Ying Xuanzi warned. Immediately, He laughed faintly and said, "However, you need not be overly afraid." Back then, Tong had gathered a group of friends during the Great Sect competition and ended up killing one of the three little kings from the Yuan Gate, severely injuring another and causing the last to flee. Dong was stunned and speechless. This senior Tong was indeed an extremely ferocious person. No wonder he possessed such a great reputation within the hearts of the Dao Sect disciples. Such a series of achievements caused him to feel his blood boil a little after listening to them. This disciple understand. Dong nodded and engraved Ying Xuanzi's words in his heart. It seemed that this Great Sect competition was indeed not just an ordinary competition. You should train properly during this period of time. There is no need for all of you to stand out during the Great Sect competition. All you need to do is to try and protect the other disciples. Ying Xuanzi waved his hand and said, "Understood." Dong did not remain any longer after seeing this. He cupped his hands together in a respectful manner, before turning around to leave. Ying Xuanzi watched the young man's back as he left. His hand gently rubbed the table. He appeared to be able to see a small semblance of Tong's figure on Dong. The both of them possess an extremely shocking talent. However, he did not know whether this Great Sect competition would end up being a little different because of Dong's appearance. Nightfall covered the land as the cool moonlight scattered down from the sky and penetrated the enormous sect defense formation that reached high up into the heavens. It was just like a thin cloth that covered the numerous mountain ranges of the Dao Sect. A young man was quietly seated within a rather secluded room. Both his hands were repeatedly forming a somewhat strange set of seals. Following the formation of these seals, a vague and peculiar ripple quietly erupted from within them. Huff! Dong's seal technique had only cycled thrice before he rubbed his forehead and stopped. The stilling effect of this static tablet truly exhausted one's energy. Even though he was a 5-seal heaven symbol master, he was already somewhat exhausted after having used it thrice. He really could not imagine just how exhausting the legendary static divine tablet would be when it was activated. It was likely that an ordinary expert would immediately disappear into the wind the moment he activated that divine item. It looks like I need to think of a way to improve my mental energy cultivation. Dong fell into deep thought. His current Yuan power had already advanced to the 6 Yuan Nirvana stage. However, his mental energy still remained at the 5-seal heaven symbol master level. There was a little favoritism that resulted in this. It seemed like Dong would have to pay more attention to his mental energy cultivation in future. But with this thought in mind, Dong was just about to shut his eyes and train when a faint ripple suddenly emerged from inside his body. Soon after, a golden light flew out from his body in front of his startled eyes. The golden light finally expanded in front of him and transformed into a golden illusory figure. Little Martin. Dong was immediately stunned when he saw this golden illusory figure. This was because the figure looked just like Little Martin. Moreover, this golden light came from the demon spirit seal that Little Martin left him before leaving. However, there had been no activity from this demon spirit seal after such a long time, and Dong had nearly forgotten it. "Hey, how's life at the Dao Sect treating you? You didn't get bullied, did you?" Little Martin's figure was quite blurry. His handsomely bewitching face stared at Dong in a teasing manner, before a familiar voice was transmitted from it. "You are finally willing to contact me." Dong rolled his eyes at this fellow in a snappy manner. Ever since Little Martin took Little Flame and left, Dong had not received any news about them. "Hehe, it's all because I want to give Little Flame a chance to become stronger. I have also heard a little about what happened to you. It seems like you are doing quite well within the Dao Sect," Little Martin smilingly said. "Not bad." Dong smiled. After which, he glanced at the illusory figure and said, "You didn't activate the demon spirit seal just to say such rubbish, right?" Little Martin laughed. Immediately, a grim expression surfaced on his handsome face as he said, "Little Flame is injured." The smile on Dong's face withdrew bit by bit, before a dark and solemn storm cloud-like expression surged into his eyes. "What happened?" "A couple of days ago while I was out, that fellow barged into a certain place and discovered some treasures. However, he ended up being injured by the experts guarding them. However, his constitution is very strong and he has largely recovered from his injuries over the past 2 days. Little Martin's eyes had a faint cold glint surging within them. What do you plan on doing? Lin Dong narrowed his eyes and spoke faintly. What else can I do? Little Flame cannot be beaten up for no reason. Little Martin laughed in a strange manner. Are you unable to handle it? Lin Dong softly asked. If Little Martin was able to easily resolve this problem, it was likely that he would not look for him. Based on Little Martin's character, it was likely that he would have just directly attacked and killed the other party. Although I have been continuously recovering my powers, I have yet to reach my peak strength. Additionally, the opponents this time around are extremely troublesome to deal with. They possessed strength from nature and they also hold unique skills. I have tried but it was not very effective. Little Martin voiced his thoughts. In that case, do you want me to head over? Lin Dong asked. The current him was also no longer that new disciple, who had just joined the Dao Sect. Right now, he could match up to a 9 Yuan Nirvana stage expert, a fact that allowed him to freely roam the Eastern Xian region. Yes. Little Martin went straight to the point. He nodded before speaking. The items that Little Flame discovered are also highly beneficial to you. We should not allow outsiders to benefit. Little Martin paused after he spoke, before he laughed in a strange fashion. Of course, if you come over, it is best that you are able to bring something else over. Only that thing can break those fellows' special technique. What? Lin Dong was stunned. The Sky Hall in the Dao Sect has a pure Yuan treasure called the Heavenly Phoenix Zither. If you are able to borrow it and bring it over, I will be able to break their special technique. Pure Yuan treasure. Heavenly Phoenix Zither. A black line appeared on Lin Dong's face when he heard these words. He spoke somewhat helplessly. Pure Yuan treasure is no ordinary object. It is a valued item even for a super sect. How can they easily allow a disciple like me to borrow it? Just try your best. If you fail to do so, I will think of another way. However, if you are able to successfully borrow the Heavenly Phoenix Zither, you should hurry to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. Once you arrive, you will be able to sense our location with the help of the Demon Spirit Seal. Little Martin also spoke somewhat helplessly. Okay. Lin Dong nodded his head with a mild headache. After which, the golden illusory figure in front of him fluctuated, before finally disappearing. Heavenly Phoenix Zither. Lin Dong's hand involuntarily rubbed his brows when he looked at the spot where the golden light had disappeared. A pure Yuan treasure was not a heavenly soul treasure. Who could he approach and ask? The Hall Chief of the Sky Hall, Chi Lei? He did not know if the other party would end up dismissing him. Furthermore, should Lin Dong accidentally lose the Heavenly Phoenix Zither, wouldn't their Sky Hall end up suffering a great loss? Such a treasure was governed by each individual hall and even Ying Xuanzi could not interfere as he pleased. Looks like I can only approach Ying Huan. Lin Dong thought about it for a while, before he realized that the only person he could count on was Ying Huan, whom he was most familiar with. However, that girl had thrown a young lady's tantrum because she was unable to meet him when she came to the desolate hall some time earlier. In fact, she had not appeared before him for quite a number of days and it was likely because she was a little angry. Hence, he wondered if she would simply roll her eyes if he asked for her help. However, given the solemn manner in which Little Martin spoke, it was likely that their current opponents were quite troublesome to deal with. Therefore, even if Lin Dong had to endure the embarrassment from Ying Huan's rolling eyes, he must thicken his skin, look for her and give it a shot. With this thought in mind, Lin Dong's expression was a little unnatural when he appeared in front of Ying Huan the next day. Ying Huan's small face was like a plank when she saw Lin Dong's expression. There were quite a number of Sky Hall disciples coming and going around her and their eyes contained some playfulness as they watched these two rather famous figures in the Dao Sect. Oh! Such a busy person has finally found some free time. Ying Huan's large eyes glanced at Lin Dong and spoke faintly. Lin Dong coughed dryly. Why did this little miss have such a fiery temper? However, when he remembered that he had a favor to ask, he could only speak, "I was still recuperating previously. You saw me being injured by senior brother Wang Yang. See, now that my injuries are healed, I have come looking for you." Lin Dong felt his face turn a little green after uttering the last sentence. It was likely that this was the first time he had spoken to a lady in such a phony manner. However, when he thought of what little Martin asked him, he could only clench his teeth and endure. Ying Huan's face turned red when she heard Lin Dong's words. Soon after, the young lady directly rolled her eyes at him in a rude manner. "In future, when you say such words to a lady, can you show your unwillingness so clearly? There are a ton of people looking for me and I don't need one more like you." Even with Lin Dong's thick skin, his face involuntarily turned a little red when he heard Ying Huan's mocking laughter. He was actually being mocked by this little lass. It was simply, "Tell me, why have you come looking for me?" Ying Huan stared at Lin Dong's rapidly changing expression, as a sly glint flashed across her large eyes. She was aware that the male pride within this fellow, whose reputation within the Dao Sect was currently soaring, had likely reached a breaking point. Therefore, she changed the topic. Lin Dong helplessly sighed upon hearing these words. Clearly, the strange and playful Ying Huan had realized his motive for taking the initiative to look for her. Her previous manner was likely an act. Lin Dong's eyes looked around him. After which, he took a step forward and approached Ying Huan. He was able to sniff the fragrance from the young lady's body. "I need your help. Can you help me to borrow something?" "What?" Ying Huan was a little puzzled as she knitted her brows. Lin Dong laughed bitterly under that young lady's bright large eyes, which appeared to have light surging across them. Finally, he thickened his skin and said, "Can you loan me the Sky Hall's Heavenly Phoenix Zither for a few days? Would it be possible to borrow your Sky Hall's Heavenly Phoenix Zither for a few days?" When Lin Dong made his request, a few shades of embarrassment appeared on his face. In fact, after he saw a tinge of bewilderment flash across that young lady's charming face, he felt even more embarrassed. "You are saying that you want to borrow the Heavenly Phoenix Zither?" Ying Huan involuntarily raised her brows. With regards to Lin Dong's request, she naturally felt extremely surprised. After all, she knew how precious a pure Yuan treasure was, and it was an object that even some Sky Hall disciples could not look at. However, Lin Dong actually wanted to borrow it. If it was another person making this request, she would have most likely asked him to dream on. "Yes." Lin Dong summoned his courage and nodded. Looking at that young lady's knitted brows and her bright and beautiful eyes, he could not help but laugh bitterly before saying, "I urgently require that item." Senior teacher Uncle Chi Lei will not agree. The Heavenly Phoenix Zither is a precious treasure of the Sky Hall after all. At times, even if a sect elder wishes to borrow it, Senior teacher Uncle Chi Lei would not agree. Ying Huan said after pondering for a while with knitted eyebrows. "Therefore, I can only ask this of you," Lin Dong said in an awkward manner. "You want me to help you to obtain it through the back door?" The young lady replied as she gently raised her beautiful face. As sunlight shone down from above, it formed a halo that was akin to a beeswax candle glow around her, causing the young lady to look especially alluring. "But why should I be so kind to you?" The young lady twirled a lock of her fine black hair with her jade-like hands, before smiling sweetly at Lin Dong and asked in an innocent and puzzled manner. Facing the young lady's gifted gab, Lin Dong found it hard to manage and could only helplessly reply, "I've helped your elder sister to obtain the commanding authority. That should count for something, right?" Ying Huan muttered as she earnestly pondered for a while before nodding her head and saying in an absent-minded manner, "However, I recall a certain boorish and rude fellow during the whole competition. Therefore, your small contribution is only enough for me to forgive your behavior during the whole competition." With the matter of Little Flame hanging in his heart, and after being provoked by Ying Huan for a few times, a small bit of anger unknowingly sprouted within Lin Dong's heart. He frowned and was just about to lose his temper, but managed to forcibly suppress it in the end. After all, Ying Huan did not owe him anything. Moreover, his request was truly a little overboard. When his thoughts reached such a point, Lin Dong could not help but to feel his interest waning. It seemed like he would have to think of another way to resolve this issue. Hey, are you mad? When she saw Lin Dong's expression change, the playful expression on Ying Huan's beautiful face receded somewhat as she asked cautiously. No, Lin Dong forced a smile and shook his head, before replying, never mind, I'll not trouble you anymore. I will think of another way. I never said I will not help you. Moreover, why doesn't your face show even a hint taking offense? You're a grown man, however, your identity is completely at odds with the way you speak, muttered Ying Huan. However, her big eyes involuntarily still glanced at Lin Dong's expression. It's not like I refuse to help you. And look at that face of yours, it's as if you aren't concerned about it. How can a man like you go back on his word? You have a way. Lin Dong awkwardly shrugged before asking. Ying Huan's jet black eyes seemed to rotate a little, before she waved at Lin Dong, follow me. After which, she turned around and swiftly floated away like a butterfly. Lin Dong hesitated for a moment, before quickly following behind. The two of them rapidly shuttled within the gigantic Sky Hall. After 10 over minutes, they had obviously entered the inner regions of Sky Hall. At this area, the security was very tight. However, with Ying Huan leading the way, the two of them were not stopped. We've arrived, said Ying Huan, before she suddenly stopped in front of an extensive and vast hall. Present was a layer of light that was shaped like a bowl, which enveloped the entire great hall within. Lin Dong looked at the light barrier in front of him. From it, he was able to sense a frightening fluctuation. It seems like this great hall must be an important place in Sky Hall. Else, there would be no need for such a valiant protection. With a wave of her jade-like hand, a piece of white jade flew out from her palm. When it touched the light barrier, it immediately provoked a violent reaction from the latter. Finally, after the ripples spread, it turned into a light door. Let's go. Ying Huan carefully and cautiously looked at her surroundings before scuttling into the light barrier. Pushing open the big doors of the great hall, she proceeded to walk in. Behind her, Lin Dong was also closely following her every step of the way. The great hall was extremely vast and there were quite a few gigantic pillars within it. The surface of those pillars were filled with abstruse runes, which faintly resembled a giant array. Lin Dong's gaze swept across the interior of the great hall for a round before suddenly congealing in the middle of the great hall. At that spot, stood a pillar of jade, and on top of it, sat a fiery red zither. Present on the surface of the zither were pictures of phoenixes flapping their wings. From afar, it looked like the wings were oscillating, similar to a seedling of fire in ascension. A frightening fluctuation slowly radiated out from within it, causing traces of spatial distortion in the surrounding space. Is that the heavenly phoenix zither? Asked Lin Dong as his eyes continued to fixate on the fiery red zither. There was a tinge of joy in his eyes that could not be concealed. After all, only a pure Yuan treasure could give off such a frightening fluctuation. Yes. Ying Huan replied while nodding her head before continuing, we can secretly take it away and return it after we are done. Steal it? Lin Dong was shocked. Don't tell me you really want to ask senior teacher Uncle Chi Lei for permission? There is no way he would agree. Even if you ask my father to plead on your behalf, it would still be of no use. Ying Huan rolled her eyes at Lin Dong before waving her jade-like hand. Curling her lips, she said, relax, if we run into any problems, I will shoulder it. I don't want somebody to lose his temper again. Lin Dong was now completely filled with embarrassment. He could only laugh bitterly while shaking his head. Finally, he told her sincerely, thank you. There's no need. Hearing his words, Ying Huan beamed like a little fox. Typically, Lin Dong always had a devil-may-care attitude. However, he had revealed his helpless expression a couple of times in front of her today. While she was smiling, Ying Huan faintly tilted her head and used her bright and big eyes to stare at Lin Dong before saying, furthermore, elder sister asked me to tell this to you. She said that at the moment when you took the initiative to hand over the commanding authority, you looked utterly dazzling. I'm not good with that. If I kept it, I might recklessly use it and mislead all those seniors and juniors. Senior sister Xiao is much better in that aspect. Thus, that position should naturally belong to those who deserve it, said Lin Dong with a smile. Ying Huan pursed her lip and smiled, before extending her jade-like hands and suddenly forming a seal. In the next moment, the heavenly phoenix zither floated from the stone pillar before finally descending into her arms. Let's leave and return quickly, said Ying Huan as she smiled while hugging the heavenly phoenix zither. Are you coming along as well? Lin Dong looked at the young lady in astonishment before he involuntarily asked. Although I don't know why you need the heavenly phoenix zither, but let me tell you this. I am the next owner of the heavenly phoenix zither. Therefore, the only person that can control it would be me. Unless that person is powerful enough to erase away the mark left by my father within, replied Ying Huan as she grinned and stared at Lin Dong while hugging the heavenly phoenix zither. Lin Dong was completely speechless. At little Martin's current strength, it was obviously that he would not be able to erase the mark left by Ying Xuanzi. Do you have any more questions? Asked Ying Huan with a beautiful smile as she tilted her head and looked at Lin Dong, who had already shriveled up countless times in front of her. Nothing. Lin Dong hesitated for a while before finally giving a bitter laugh and nodded his head. As he turned around and left the great hall, Ying Huan looked at his back before a cunning glint flashed across her big eyes. After this, she leisurely followed behind him. After the two of them left, the great hall was once again silent. A few minutes later, the space above a stone pillar started to squirm before two figures slowly appeared. From their appearances, they were precisely Ying Xuanzi and Sky Hall Master, Qi Lei. That lass. Qi Lei looked down at that empty stone pillar before his face twitched. Finally, he involuntarily blurted out, Sect Master, we just going to allow two juniors to take the heavenly phoenix zither out of Dao Sect? Relax, have some confidence in them. Just treat it as if they are going out to train for once. Moreover, there is a brand on the heavenly phoenix zither. If a major accident occurs, I will be able to detect it, said Ying Xuanzi as he faintly smiled. Hearing what Ying Xuanzi said, Qi Lei could only nod his head. Promptly, he didn't know whether to laugh or to cry as he said, that lass Huan, she is a disciple of our Sky Hall. Yet, she actually helped Lin Dong to steal a treasure from her own house. What is going on? It seems like that lass. Ying Xuanzi gave a faint smile. However, he did not say anything more about this topic. With a wave of his sleeve, the two of them once again slowly disappeared from the top of the stone pillar. On the outskirts of the sect, at the edge of the sect protection great array light barrier, there was a sudden ripple as two figures secretly sneaked out from within. Hugging the fiery red heavenly phoenix zither while her big eyes surveyed her surroundings, Ying Huan grinned and said, we were actually able to leave undiscovered. In contrast to Ying Huan's optimistic attitude, Lin Dong started to wrinkle his brows. He was cautious by nature. Hence, he naturally found it incredulous that they were actually able to steal a pure Yuan treasure and still swagger out of Dao Sect, which was heavily fortified and filled with countless experts. Moreover, they were not caught by a single person. Could it be that all the old fellows in Dao Sect were asleep? Evidently, there was no way those old fellows would all be asleep. Therefore, Lin Dong did not believe that their actions had gone undetected. Rather, someone should have likely realized what happened. However, they chose not to stop them. Reflecting on this point, Lin Dong secretly rejoiced in his heart. It was fortunate that he had brought Ying Huan along. Given her status and background in Dao Sect, perhaps those old fellows might be willing to look the other way. Naturally, within all of this, Ying Xuanzi's influence must not be discounted. Secretly heaving a sigh of relief, Lin Dong turned around, faced Dao Sect and respectfully saluted. Upon seeing his action, Ying Huan gawked first, before sticking out her tongue. It seems like she understood the reason behind his actions. After saluting, he turned around again. Promptly, his body faintly trembled before a pair of green dragon wings stretched out from his back. With a flap, huge gales followed. Come here, said Lin Dong as he looked at Ying Huan and extended his hands towards her. Why? Ying Huan hugged the heavenly phoenix zither and walked over with some suspicion. In the next moment, she turned somewhat panicky when she saw that Lin Dong had unexpectedly extended his hands and embraced her slender waist. Ying Huan seemingly jumped in fright due to Lin Dong's actions. Only when his manly scent assaulted her senses did she finally regain her clarity. Immediately, she used the heavenly phoenix zither to shield her body while she stared at Lin Dong with a boiling red expression on her face. I am much faster, so it would be best if I carried you directly. It is a long distance away from Thousand Beasts mountain range to Dao Sect, said Lin Dong as he looked slightly helplessly at the young lady with a reddened face. Ying Huan's big eyes stared at Lin Dong, seemingly wanting to detect any malicious intent within his eyes. However, in the end, she did not discover any malicious intent as she only saw the helplessness brimming within his eyes. If you dare to mess around, I'll take the heavenly phoenix zither and return to Dao Sect, mumbled Ying Huan in a low voice. Relax, I have no interest in a silly little girl like you, replied Lin Dong as he rolled his eyes towards her. Without saying any more nonsense, he wrapped her up in his embrace. With a flap of his green dragon wings, they turned into a flash of light before they flew off. Miss, you a dog? Why are you biting me? That's for speaking nonsense. You are the silly little girl. As the flash of light shot into the distance, an indistinct overbearing voice of a young lady transmitted across the skies. The Thousand Beasts mountain range was situated in the southern part of eastern Xian region. It required approximately half a month's time to travel from Dao Sect to that region. However, as Lin Dong's current speed had undoubtedly increased substantially, they barely took a week before the vast and extensive mountain range appeared in front of their eyes. As the name implied, the Thousand Beasts mountain range was the gathering point for demonic beasts. Although the number of demonic beasts was not as terrifying as those in the demon city, there were also numerous powerful and formidable demonic beast strongholds scattered across eastern Xian region. This Thousand Beasts mountain range was one of them. It was said that this mountain range was never lacking in strong demonic beasts at profound life stage. Those beings were able to take on human form and possess intelligence that rivaled humans. Hence, most ordinary individuals would not dare to provoke them. As Lin Dong gradually approached the enormous Thousand Beasts mountain range, he was able to feel the demonic spirit brand left within his body by little Martin starting to radiate a faint vibration. Kai? Lin Dong could feel the direction indicated by the fluctuation from the demonic spirit brand. With a flap of his dragon wings, he shot towards it. After close to 10 minutes, his pupils hardened when he finally spotted two familiar figures that he had not seen for a long time, on a mountaintop in the far distance. Big Brother. Before Lin Dong started to descend on the mountain peak, a figure that was sturdy like an iron tower stood up impatiently before his vigorous voice transmitted like muffled thunder from the distance. With Ying Huan in his arms, Lin Dong flew towards the mountain peak before he placed her down. Staring in front of him, he saw two figures standing upright. The person on the left was a man dressed in green robe with a bewitching and handsome appearance. At the moment, he still had his familiar lazy expression on his face. However, when he glanced at Lin Dong could detect a twinkle in his eye. The figure beside little Martin was the enormous and extremely visually impactful Little Flame. There were quite a few crisscrossed eye-piercing scars and bruises on his body as compared to before. These few scars and bruises faintly added a malevolent and fiendish aura to Little Flame. If he restrained the silly laughter on his face upon seeing Lin Dong, he would definitely look like an extremely menacing and powerful individual. Yo, not bad, you have improved quite a bit. Looks like you didn't waste the time spent in Dao Sect, said little Martin with his eyebrows raised, after sweeping his eyes across Lin Dong's body. Lin Dong walked forward without paying attention to him and looked at Little Flame, before a somewhat astonished expression rushed forth from within his eyes. He realized that Little Flame could currently match up to an 8 Yuan Nirvana stage expert. He was personally taught by Grandpa Martin. Of course, he won't be weaker than you, said little Martin with a self-satisfied smug after seeing the shocked expression on Lin Dong's face. His usual tone was still as infuriating as before. Not bad, said Lin Dong, patting the shoulders of Little Flame while nodding his head in satisfaction. Looks like it was right for Little Flame to follow little Martin. If he had stayed in Dao Sect, Little Flame would not have reached this level yet. It was all thanks to Second Brother's help. He brought me to quite a few places. Little Flame honestly and straightforwardly shook his head. This ominous tiger that was so savage and cruel that it caused anyone to be absolutely terrified, was actually behaving in such a silly fashion in front of Lin Dong. This caused little Martin to be unable to bear as he covered his face and sighed in disappointment. Typically, Little Flame would always follow his lead, however, it was absolutely different from the implicit faith that he had in Lin Dong. Lin Dong gave a smile before finally looking at little Martin and saying, "How much of your strength have you regained? It shouldn't be a problem to deal with practitioners at advanced profound life stage," said little Martin indifferently as an arc appeared on his bewitchingly beautiful face. Advanced profound life stage. Lin Dong faintly nodded his head. Senior teacher Uncle Chen Zhen should also be at this stage. Looks like during this period of time, little Martin had indeed recovered quite a bit of his old powers. "Why is there a girl with you? Why did you bring her here? I seemingly recalled that she didn't really fancy you, right?" said little Martin with a little astonishment after his eyes suddenly landed on Ying Huan, who was not far behind Lin Dong. Looking at her appearance, he could still remember the attitude that she had shown to Lin Dong on that selection stage. Lin Dong tilted his head and shot a look at the young lady. At this moment she was still at a short distance away from them. Thinking about it, Lin Dong realized that she might have been frightened by the extremely contrasting combination of little Martin and Little Flame. Upon seeing this, he could not resist and smiled. Normally within Dao Sect, this lass was fearless. However, never would Lin Dong imagine that she would become so timid after coming out. Lin Dong called Ying Huan over, before introducing her to them. When little Martin found out that she was actually the daughter of the Dao Sect master, a shade of amazement clearly flashed across his handsome face. Evidently, he had never expected that she had such a background. "It was all thanks to her that I was able to borrow the heavenly phoenix zither. Else, perhaps there may not be a show," said Lin Dong as he spread his arms. He, looks like that little miss treats you pretty well," said the little Martin with a smirk. Beside him, Ying Huan's face turned red as she sent a sweet smile towards little Martin. Her appearance was so fresh and pure that it made Lin Dong roll his eyes. "Who is she acting for? It's good that you managed to obtain the heavenly phoenix zither. It will save us quite a bit of trouble. Those damnable yellow-furred monsters, wait till Grandpa Martin breaks your heavenly sound array. I'll show you how I will deal with you all," exclaimed little Martin with excitement as he brandished his hands. "Tell me what is going on first, and what is the object that Little Flame discovered?" asked Lin Dong after rolling his eyes at little Martin. "Relax, that thing is definitely worth your trip here." "What is it?" said Lin Dong as he raised his eyebrows. Little Martin gave a self-satisfied smile before a mysterious shade appeared within his eyes. In the next moment, he suppressed his voice before a soft whisper stealthily entered Lin Dong's ears. "Earth core spiritual brewing saliva." As the 5 words gently floated into Lin Dong's ears, Lin Dong's pupils immediately contracted while Ying Huan could not resist but release a startled cry. This video will end here.